Okay, welcome back, everyone. Thank you again for joining me during these circuitry sessions. I think it's been a lot of fun so far, and I hope you guys have learned something about this fascinating topic called circuitry. Again, circuitry as an area of study in human design is the examination of what are called circuit groups, which are essentially groupings of different channels. And these different groupings all share similar themes. So far, we've covered the tribe and its major and minor circuit, which is the tribal ego and the tribal defense circuit with the super keynote of support. We've had a look and examined the fact that the tribal circuitry as a whole is primarily concerned with setting up business enterprises and communal support structures in order to support and nurture the reproduction and the raising of our children so that we can perpetuate our tribal cycles into the future. It has a very heavy materialistic slant to it. It can be territorial and highly competitive, and it essentially is tasked with doing what is necessary in order to control and maintain stability of assets, again, so that the tribe, whether it be a family unit or a business unit, can thrive and survive in this material world in which we all live in. So we've moved through the tribal circuitry, and actually now we've also covered both sides of the collective circuitry. As we saw and explored, the collective circuitry has a lot more to do with sharing. It's more impersonal in with relative respect to the tribe. Okay, and that the collective, its primary emphasis is on two things. One of which is gathering and collecting new experiences, right? So there's this longing and this pressure and this desire to go out into the world and travel and experience things, and to, through those new experiences, be able to gain a sense of progress in one's life, all basically out of a desire and a need to overcome boredom and stagnation. The collective abstract, as I was just mentioning, also provides us with this deep perseverance and this ability to stick with it even when the going gets tough. Yet, unlike its dancing partner, the logic collective understanding circuit, which is the mirror to the abstract sensing circuit, it doesn't have a very strong grasp on formulas or patterns or the capacity to actually plan or predict things into the future. See, that's the job of logic, as we've discovered, as we've explored. Logic circuitry, its primary emphasis is on being able to establish an understanding of something, of someone, of a group, of a system, of a knowledge base, a technology, of a medicine, something that is then shared with the collective as a whole so that the collective may benefit, whether it be strategic plans, or like I mentioned, medicine, or the repeating of fixed patterns in a productive and an efficient way through the expression of a talent. The logic capacity within us, again, is tasked with something very important, which is the ability to be predictable and to secure our tomorrow by repeating patterns that have been proven, tested, and shown to be capable of our trustworthiness as a collective whole. So again, if you're someone who carries that kind of energy, it's to recognize that you have an ability within yourself to be seen and maybe projected onto by others as having the skills and having the repeatability and having the focus that is so necessary for our world to thrive and develop and be held together in the way in which it is. Okay. So now we're moving away from those two major components as we move into individuality. So the rest of our sessions together, we focused on individual energy, which is very different from tribal energy and extremely different from collective energy. And yet, what's so fascinating, as I've mentioned before, is it's all interwoven and connected in one way, shape, or another within the context of the BodyGraph. Okay. And what we're going to start exploring today is actually called the integration channel. And it's not a stream as we've explored with these other circuit groups. It is actually technically its own channel. And it can be best understood as a very self-absorbed power and intuitive clarity for one's own personal behavior in order to survive in the now moment. So right out of the gates, you can see how it's different from the traditions and the hierarchy and the memory patterns associated with the tribe and the tribe's materialistic, businessy, communal focus. It's very different from the collective sensing abstract circuitry with its primary emphasis on gaining new experiences for the sake of having new experiences. And it's certainly different from the perfectionistic tendencies of the collective understanding logic circuitry and its constant critiquing of our formulas to try and make a better world that it believes all people should participate within. The integration channel is very selfish. It is very much so about the energy of the individual being able to defend itself and to differentiate itself so that it may be capable of surviving no matter what. Okay, so it's the energy that allows us to survive as individuals even outside of the context of tribal support or collective sharing. All right. It's the kind of energy that will allow you to thrive as an individual and to have your own unique intuitive capacity and power to behave and navigate the world of the collective and the world of the tribe while still maintaining, it's like a heightened awareness or degree of individual differentiation, even amongst the, call it chaos, or again, traditions or collective norms we so often see out there in the world. So just to review, the collective understanding logic circuit, the super keynote is sharing. Okay, so it's a pressure and an availability, okay, that's concerned with collective survival, collective leadership, and the capacity to communicate complex analytical details, all under pressure to make sense of a formula and to come up with an answer so that we can assuage our doubts and feel more secure going into the future. In humanity, this emphasizes patterned predictability, planning, and perfection, using a mathematical intelligence, as we would understand it, to turn concepts into actions, similar to the discipline of a violinist practicing or an architect drawing. And unlike the collective sensing abstract circuit group, this circuit group is more reliable and less risky, relying on rigorous testing, repetition, and focused determination to achieve desired outcomes through logical processes. However, as we explored previously, the circuit group is energy starved, unlike the collective sensing or abstract circuitry that has direct access to a motor through the context of the solar plexus. The only energy gates in this particular circuit group are the 58, the 52, the 9, and the 5, and none of them actually make their way directly to the throat. Okay, so it's all, this particular circuit group is highly dependent upon essentially the tribe and its materialistic, capitalistic, communal approach to support and material gain to want to hire the talent, okay, and to hire the perfectionistic capacity to repeat patterns and lead ourselves into the future in order to be able to actually express this energy in our world. You can see it exemplified by like research projects receiving funding from, say, a private tribal investor group, okay, whereby the circuit is then led by alphas and generators with the energy to work with details and repeat patterns. And I mentioned generators because, like I said last week, when we were covering the circuit group, you'll never see a projector, a manifestor, or a reflector with the 52.9 or the 515. Of course, as a projector, manifestor, or reflector, you can have gates. You can have hanging, dormant gates coming out of the sacral. You may have the 5, you may have the 9, you may have the 52, you may have the 15. But those 3 types are never going to be embodying consistently the full channels associated with the sacral energy within this logic circuit group. So it really is about generators with the energy to work with details and repeat patterns that are our most reliable sources of security in terms of actually being able to get the work done, to be able to work, to produce things, to focus on details, to repeat patterns, and to be a stable, predictive force that our collective society can rely on. Of course, so the job for the projector would be to guide the process, okay, to guide using logical strategies. For the manifestor, it would be to initiate and possibly be an alpha or somebody who embodies the plan or the vision or the leadership style of that particular collective project. And then, of course, the reflectors with their very important job of being able to assess objectively and in many ways judge and critique whether or not the group is operating in a healthy manner according to plan, right? So to be objective, to be able to assess a process. The stream of taste within this group, which again runs from the 5818 through the 4816, drives the pursuit of perfection and a relentless self-improvement, often displaying as what we would perceive as an unemotional intelligence. Again, not to say that someone with this energy can't have emotional definition or be emotional by their nature. It's just that the spleen runs cool. It's much more logical. It's much more analytical, more strategic, okay, more existential, and can actually be very clear in its capacity to assess a situation and to express a talent. Again, we'll see that here, focusing on refinement and mastery, like that dynamic between a demanding dance teacher and a striving ballerina. The demanding dance teacher being the critical 5818 and the striving ballerina being the up-and-coming talent, also longing to share her skills with the collective and be recognized for her abilities. This group also includes the stream of understanding, which runs from the head through the ajna down to the throat, where the pressure of doubt, so doubting formulas, doubting patterns, leads to questioning and verifying those patterns through an analysis process, with communication styles heavily reliant on detailed substantiation, as you would see through the 1762. Okay, so the 1762, design of an organizational being. If you have one of these people in your life, just witness, or maybe if you are a 1762, but just witness how their mind likes to organize things in their external environment, especially things having to do with other people. 1762 is again being collective. It's not necessarily about their own individual lives being highly organized, but rather this mind, this detail-oriented mind looking to collectively organize others to follow through with a plan, okay? Or to come to some sort of collective understanding that is then shared. Yeah. In summary, the collective understanding logic circuit is all about the application of our focused capacity to repeat detailed work and follow a plan and express a talent that has been refined and mastered through practice and repetition, all so that we can feel a little less anxious about whether or not chaos will ensue in the world. Okay, so it really is like being able to do things correctly, consistently, to a high standard, so that the collective may benefit. Okay? Benefit from things like technology or medicine or modern transportation solutions. Even the computer I'm using right now and the software I'm using right now and the human design system itself is an expression of logic. Like I mentioned before, Ra was a 62. is in his incarnation cross as a clarion. So he had this voice for details, this voice for naming things, right? Being able to name all the component pieces of the system and bring it all together in a unified whole, and then teach it to us so that we may understand it and then be able to share it as a collective unit. He was also a 48, so he shared his depth and his details with the collective, and the collective has certainly benefited from that. It's really fascinating to consider how these different circuit groups, in essence, are so different from each other, and yet at the same time are all embodied within the same entirety of the framework of what it is to be a human being. Tribal energy and its emphasis on materialism and support. You have collective energy and its emphasis on sharing and new experiences and refining patterns. And then you have individuality, which is very different from either of those two extremes. It's not about support of others, and it's not about sharing. It's something about being a unique individual. Okay, so an individual person, not even an individual group or an individual company. It's literally about the individual person. Okay, and this particular component of individuality is called the integration channel, and the channel runs from the sacral to the spleen up to the G before making its way to the throat when it's all defined. Okay, and it's quite interesting because it's actually an amalgamation of, meaning a combination of 4 different channels all wrapped up into one, as we'll see shortly. The integration channel itself represents the essence of what it is to be a self-sufficient individual with the power and correct behavior to survive on one's own, trusting in a deeply acoustic, intuitive awareness. That's coming from the gentle in the 57, right? Because you'll notice now the senses have changed once again. We started off with the tribe and its need for touch and smell as a sense. Then we moved into the collective where everything is visual. Show me, let me see it. Let me see it to understand it. Let me see it to experience it. And now when we move into individuality, the senses here are acoustic. Okay, so the awareness process and how this energy modulates its behavior and how it controls its own power and how it decides what to do in any now moment is dependent upon hearing and sound and how those sound patterns are interpreted. Okay? So it's trusting in a deeply acoustic, intuitive awareness for how to use one's own personal power in any given circumstance, often in defense of one's self-sanctity, meaning one's own personal holiness. Okay? It's about self-preservation, essentially. And not self-preservation in the sense of, oh, I'm going to preserve myself for the tribe. No, it's self-preservation for literally that person's self. Okay, of course, you can have someone in their design have channels other than just the integration channel. So their individuality will in some way, shape, or form be connected to, or maybe disconnected if they're split from their tribal collective lives. But at the core, this channel, the integration channel, and all of the energy within it is entirely self-focused, self-centered in its nature. And it's unlike any other channel in the BodyGraph, as it is in fact an amalgamation, like I mentioned, of 4 separate channels into one. Integration represents the backbone of the BodyGraph and is tasked with defending the life form of the individual. Okay? Separate from the other 3 main circuit groups, the integration channel has its own unique process that differs greatly from the tribe, the collective, and even the individual knowing circuit. Because as you'll see when we get to the individual knowing circuit, that particular circuit group is about the empowerment of other individuals. Okay? For example, I'm a 4323, so here I am explaining my insights to you. And the idea is that it's empowering to you as an individual. Okay? That's kind of how that energy works. And yet, when you look at integration, anything within the context of the backbone here, it's not about the empowerment of other individuals. It's about empowerment of that person from within themselves. Okay? Very different. Again, the integration channel can be best understood as being incredibly self-absorbed and selfish in the way in which it operates. No other circuit group is as unconcerned with or unavailable to the other as the integration channel. The motto here is busy in the now for myself, empowered by my own intuition and behavior. Again, integration has the ability to pull back from the tribe, to distance itself from the collective, and to find a way, using its own power and intuitive capacities, to survive on its own. Unlike the tribe, with its loyalty to the family, ambitions to succeed in business, and need to group together in communities, or the collective sensing and its fantasies and desires to engage in new shared experiences in order to make progress and gain wisdom, or, as we covered last week, the collective understanding and its concern for the future and logical application of formulas and plans to secure it, the integration channel only has one job and one concern. That is being the power for differentiation and the self-empowerment of the person that carries this energy. It is not an energy that is available for others, as is the case for all of the other circuit groups. Remember, tribe is all about support, so that involves other people. The collective is all about sharing, that obviously involves other people. But when it comes to integration, it really is about that person and their particular life journey and their particular strategy for survival and how it applies to them as an individual unit, as an individual sovereign being. Okay. And yet what you'll see is those with the channel of struggle, 3818, can in a way get the integration channel to pay attention to them. So a struggling individual, all right, has the ability to get the attention of those with integration, okay? And only then will integration be available to empower someone other than themselves. And only because they can relate life being a struggle for purpose without the support and sharing benefits of the tribe or collective. So running from the sacral into the spleen, so you make a hard left into the spleen, then up to the throat while first connecting to the G center, the gate of behavior of the self. The integration channel represents a power, an intuition for the correct behavior in the now. A very strong energy for doing, manifesting, and generating with absolute clarity, all wrapped into a single channel. Again, it's unlike any other channel or circuit component that you will see anywhere else in the BodyGraph. It's very unique. And of course, when you look at your own design or you look at the designs of other people, sometimes individuals will have components of integration. They may not have the full channel. They may have one of the component channels, I'll call it. So they may have the 3457 or the 5710, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have the 20th gate activated. So they may have a powerful intuition for the correct behavior, but they may not necessarily have the ability to apply that intuitive awareness in the now moment. And sometimes it may actually come out through another channel. They may still be a manifesting generator, but let's say, for example, they're like a 3457, 10, 731. This is like a very self-empowered alpha. right? So hopefully that's an alpha that feels self-empowered so that their own self-empowered tendencies are expressed in a healthy way and doesn't affect the leadership plan or strategies of the group that they're responsible for. You can see how the energy can actually begin to interplay in someone's real design. Now, these are just a few examples to help you guys further get and understand what a person with a lot of integration may display as, or certain traits. And what you will see are things like self-preservation coming first, or self-preservation first, a self-centeredness. Okay, this person will likely prioritize their own well-being above all else. They may choose a lifestyle that ensures their personal safety and security, even if it means distancing themselves from family or community obligations. Okay, their decisions are driven by what benefits them in the immediate sense, rather than what is expected by their social group or society at large, which can be a really good thing, of course. Doesn't mean it's bad, right? At all. You could be in like a dangerous collective situation or a violent tribal situation and have a lot of integration that gives you the capacity to be able to survive that. Because you have your own power, you have your own intuition, you have your own behavioral style in the now moment, and an inbuilt energy that is yours and yours alone. Because basically, again, the tribe is like this exchange system that's always taking and giving and taking and giving and taking and giving. And the collective is always sharing. Nothing's ever personal. The energy is always coming and going, in and out. Integration is like this permanent power, this permanent energy within you that is yours and yours alone, and is not even capable of actually being shared with others. Remember, the super keynote is self-empowerment. Okay. You may also see people with a lot of integration being very present oriented. Okay. Unlike those who are constantly planning for the future or reflecting on the past, this individual lives in the now. They can be more spontaneous, making decisions based on current needs or desires rather than long-term goals or past experiences. They can be very existential. It can also show up as a non-conformist attitude, right? They show little interest in conforming to societal norms or expectations. This might manifest in unconventional lifestyle choices, for example, like opting out of traditional career paths or societal roles, focusing instead on what feels right for them at the moment. And maybe instead of feel, it should actually be like what they intuit. They know. What they know is right for them. What they know that they need to do in the now moment to maintain a healthy sense of self for themselves. Which again may involve distancing from the tribe or distancing from societal norms or expectations that are so prevalent when looking at collective circuitry. Of course, it could also express as an indifference to perfectionism, meaning, the individual in the context of the integration channel is not about being collectively perfect. You'll see that there is the channel of perfected form, but it's not about being judgmental or critical or seeking this constant refinement as we see with the collective. It's more about being just self-centered and self-confident and wise and powerful within your own nature and clear. Okay. They're more likely to take an easygoing, kind of laissez-faire approach to life, potentially, focusing on enjoying the moment rather than striving for perfection or worrying about making decisions that impact others. It can be like that. I mean, if you're someone who has a lot of integration, or if you know someone who has a lot of integration, self-centeredness and doing things on behalf of your own personal individual well-being is really important. And again, in many ways, what that shows up like is a distancing from tribal responsibilities and expectations placed upon you by the collective societal norms. And for some people who deal with others in their life that have integration, let's say you have someone who has a lot of integration and someone who's very tribal. That can be a difficult situation because that tribal person is going to come at that relationship from the perspective of, hey, well, we need to support each other. I need to do this for you because I need to do this for you because I need to do this for you, right? Supporting the other, supporting the children. Whereas the integration person can quite confidently take the approach of, well, I need to do this for me because I need to do this for me because I need to do this for me, right? Different. And without awareness, that can be challenging. With awareness, it can be beautiful. And again, very rarely will you see someone who has exclusively integration in their design. I actually don't think I've ever seen that in all the charts I've ever looked at. There's always somewhere that even someone who may be like the poster child of integration does connect to the collective or the tribe. But from an educational perspective, again, looking at this channel and looking at this energy and understanding that it is very self-absorbed. Self-reliant. It's important for people with integration energy to be encouraged to be self-reliant, which can ultimately, through the context of other channels, other gates, express as a supportive nature, right? But it starts with being self-reliant in their decision-making, trusting their intuition, making decisions independently, relying on their own internal compass, right? The G center, aka behavior, you know. If you're an opportunist in the 10-4 and you've got all this power behind you and a very clear, intuitive, splenic response that it's correct for you to take advantage of a certain opportunity when they arise, right? Really important to follow, especially if you're sacral generator and you're unemotional, it would be that intuitive, existential, in the moment, opportunistic. Take advantage of this opportunity, take advantage of the network, take advantage of the connection so that they can feel satisfied, so that they can feel integrated. Their intuitive approach to life is centered on immediate personal satisfaction and survival. And of course, the mind, because remember, the mind is dominated by the collective with this hint of individuality running through the center in terms of like the ajna mind. The mind will hear this and go, wow, what a piece of work, you know, like, what are we supposed to do with these highly self-absorbed individuals who don't care about supporting other people or sharing their power with others? Like, how do we deal with that? It's for the individual to decide, right? That individual with that integration capacity to be able to, you know, live up to the challenges of the collective, live up to the stickiness and the communal expectations of the bargain, you know? And now, of course, if you get someone with integration and they're aligned with their design and they've been encouraged to make decisions independent of the opinions or the ideas of others, to trust their gut instinct and to trust their gut intuition, I should say. Of course, it can be an amazing energy to have around in groups. And in many ways, especially if you had the full integration channel, you can think of it as like a lessening of susceptibility to being conditioned. Because if you're attuned with your own intuition, if you're attuned with your own behavioral style and can use your own power to get things done in the now moment, heck, you're golden. You know, you have a way to be able to make it in the world. Not necessarily going to be traditional. It's not necessarily going to be something that's been done before. It'll be something unique. And of course, that's what makes individuals so interesting, is that they're all unique. Because the individuality in us demands that we find a unique, never been done before style of being able to survive and make it on our own, which may or may not come back to others as support, you know? Of course, like I mentioned, a lack of any of the four gates involved, and you'll note there's only four gates in the integration channel, four gates, four channels. A lack of any one of those gates would express in a unique way. Let's say you have the 34, 10, 20. You have the power to behave in the now, but it may not be backed by a consistent intuitive awareness. And if the spleen was undefined, here's someone who's got all this power to behave in the now, but they may be holding on to things that aren't good for them. They may be holding on to a collective societal norm or a tribal expectation that's not actually bringing them their individual survival. Or they may not have the intuitive clarity for how to apply their energy in the now, so they can just be very inefficient in the way in which they use their energy. Again, unless they have a focusing element here that allows them to focus their abilities and to channel their energy correctly. I say correctly, and it's actually more just efficiently. You can have the 34, 57, 20 without the behavioral aspect, right? So you can have someone with a very strong, powerful intuition in the now, but they may not know how to behave around others, or be conditioned, right? So they'd be open and susceptible to being conditioned. And that's kind of where you can get difficulties, in a sense, where, let's say, someone with a lot of individual energy, and of course, I've mentioned to you guys again that the 34 and how it expresses, again, it's like it's not available for others, and yet people don't really know that, right? They don't really know that this energy that someone else embodies or that they may themselves embody isn't available for others. So it gets assimilated, right? By the Borg. The Borg assimilates integration people into, still using their energy, even though it's really not available for other people. And you get complications, you get frustration, right? I guess if you kind of boil it down, it's like, as an individual, and if you have a lot of integration, if you're not doing something that you love, if you're not doing something that feels right, if you're not doing something that you enjoy talking about or enjoy contemplating or enjoy manifesting, and you're simply being conditioned by some tribal community or collective expectation, it's likely going to bring a sense of frustration, right? That not self theme of being conditioned, having your inner authority process overridden by external conditioning forces. And of course, it's almost in a way, and I don't even know if this is correct, but I'm going to say it anyway because to me it makes sense. It's almost as though we're less susceptible to being conditioned by integration than we are the tribe or the collective. And yet we still can be conditioned to be self-sufficient. We can be conditioned to be busy in the now. I mean, I certainly have been previously. I don't have any of the integration channel. I don't have the 34, the 57, the 10, or the 20. But I've certainly been conditioned to be a busy, overzealous projector. And of course, that led to burnout and bitterness, with a hint of success. You can be conditioned to be distanced from your tribe when really it's actually correct for you to be a part of a tribe, to be part of a group, to not just be a solo alpha, which is kind of what I would call people with integrations, like solo alphas, right? Well, they're solo role models, right? Because you get the 10th gate, 6th line. This is where you'll see individuals with powerful role model-like behavior doing things in the world that inspire others to be more like themselves, okay? To be an example. Before we go into the centers, gates, and channels, and talk about Ra, because I'm using Ra today as our example of someone with integration, which he spoke about ad nauseum during his lectures about being someone who has a lot of integration and what that was like for him. You can go back to almost any one of his lectures. I can remember at some point or another, he talks about himself, right? Of course, 4323, very empowering mind, shared the details of human design with us. And yet you'll hear him reference his inaccessibility, especially as a manifestor with a closed and repelling aura, his inaccessibility to others other than those in his life that carried the channel of struggle, that would struggle with him for him to share his depth and details and what he knew about the system, right? Again, we'll get into an example with him a little bit later on. Share your experience of what it's been like being someone with a lot of integration.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I've never actually been in one of these, so I don't necessarily even know the context of the premise. I'll just sort of start by saying that of what's going on here. So I'm just hanging out until I have other information. But do I call you Life Force? Is that what I can call you?
Yeah, my name's Ryan, but you can call me
R-
Life Force either
Okay,
way.
Ryan. Ryan, either way. Great.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, everything you've said so far about integration, I mean, it checks out. I'll give you a quick example. I kind of am, I'm a 4-1 and I'm a quad right. So the self-sufficiency part has been this like, oh my God, how do I figure this out? But also having, as someone who only has the 3457, it very much is like alpha energy. Don't tell me what to do. And, a lot of times growing up, I think I have to check my parents' charts, but like I have most likely like a pretty sort of tribal collective like upbringing, and a lot of my life has been, you know, dad goes, "Hey, can you take me to the tire shop? Can you pick us up from the airport?" And I basically say no,
Yeah.
and then they get very pissed about it. They go, "No, well, you're supposed to do this for us," and I'm going, I have more important things to do. And oftentimes they would be around like a project that I just picked up around like empowering people or something.
Uh-huh.
And I would always be like, no, man, like this thing's more important. Like don't tell me what to do is a constant. And so that's like scratching the surface, but just a small example, of something like that. Or right now the way I create my self-sufficiency is in a way that's not I mean, I'm somewhat tribal. Like I have a 26 personality son, so there's a little bit there, but it's really not terribly tribal compared to other ways that you might think of it, like the W-2 right now. At some point maybe, but right now it's like I piece together an income through all these different things that I'm just into. And it's really Ryan, maybe you used the word selfish earlier. It's very selfish. And it works.
Yeah.
It really works. I feel great. So
Yeah. Good. Good. Very good. And it's see, this is the thing is there's so much almost like a distaste by the collective or the tribe that, oh, how could he survive on his own? And because it's not support oriented and because the energy is not available for others, we can be conditioned away from trusting in our own self absorbed, selfish nature, which is actually kind of the key to our own satisfaction or success or peace or surprise. And in your case, again, you're a generator, right? You got the 3457.
yeah, exactly.
And do you have a defined solar plexus?
No, all I have is the 3457. But
Nice.
I have three unconscious gates in the sixth and the 36. So it's a doozy.
Right. And yet still you'll see so and you can understand now that your sacral response is always connected to this deep intuitive clarity in the now. So it's like what you're responding to is what's going to make you as an individual feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if this is going off topic, but like, or if we should even mix in things like variable. Um, but there was this one point in my life where I was living with a few other people. This was around the time of my Saturn return, and at least I feel like the way that my 3457 expresses is very like, I don't want to catch a disease from you, like strong defined spleen, essentially. And I was living with a couple people, and there was this like period of time where we couldn't open any of the windows because the landlord was like, no, we can't open the windows, like, but flies are getting in or whatever. And I kind of felt like one of my roommates had a really bad case of COVID. And I just remember standing outside the home and going, something's intuitively saying no, like don't go in there, don't go in there. And I have inner cognition and this 3457. And so I kind of stood out there for sort of hours, and we were able to persuade one of the roommates, the one who was not feeling well, to take a test. They said, no, no, it doesn't work at this point. I said, no, I'm really not sure. I'm really not sure. And they took a test, and sure enough, it was positive. And I went, aha.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and I just kind of felt like I could almost see with my eyes, like, no, something about this house is not right. And I went to a hotel that night, and was fine. Um, but I don't know, just a little example of, and meanwhile, my integration slash, I don't know what else he has. He must have other like tribal and collective stuff as well. Um, Defined had an ajna, no 4323, so definitely had some like logical collective type stuff. He was like, no, how could you possibly know? And I'm like, I just know. And then we found out, and I knew. So I don't know if that adds anything,
It does. It
Ryan,
does.
but
Thank you
okay.
very much
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's a wonderful example in showing the difference between like the tribal because the collective understanding. The collective understanding doesn't understand anything in the now moment. It requires
Right.
this like rigorous over extended period of time testing process, right? So it's like let's test them and then a week and a half from now we'll understand whether or not they have COVID. But how could you possibly know in the now moment? And then
No,
there's again,
yeah.
there's the job of the individual, the capacity of intuition and the capacity of knowing, which is it's I would say in many ways overshadowed by the heaviness of the tribe and its
Mhm.
uh, traditions. So how things have been done in the past is how we're always going to be doing things going into the future. Or again, the collective and how it has to go through this complex analytical. Let's test it. Let's experiment with it. How could you possibly know in the now moment?
Yeah, exactly. Let's take 3 years and where's the data and you have to pull it all
Yeah.
together, and the tribe is, to me, I've often heard something along the lines of don't be selfish.
Yeah.
Don't do that. And I'm like,
Oh yeah.
No, you don't be selfish. You don't, So
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for sharing. That was an excellent example, and thank you. You had a lot of value, especially coming from
thank
someone who embodies it.
thank you.
Back into the centers, gates, and channels. Again, there's four, 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 four. Easy to remember. It's like the most complex and the least complex at the same time. Like the least amount of component pieces, and yet essentially the way in which this schematic shows up is that it's this crisscross, integrated, interwoven complex of energy that is actually one channel, uh, but is an amalgamation of four channels. So I almost wish they used like a different word rather than the integration channel. It's kind of like it's using the integration backbone sort of makes sense. It's like the integration backbone is made up of four channels all connected into one. Okay. What we have here is we have the sacral and the power to empower oneself. The 34 is asexual. All of the other gates in the sacral have sexual themes associated with them, not just the 59. The 59 is the gate of sexuality. However, all of the other gates have themes associated with bonding. We're not going to get into that today, but the 34 is power. It's the raw energy to do things. And it's unavailable for others, strictly speaking. Um, its only concern is okay, we have to provide this individual life form with a motorized intuition so that their identity can survive in the now moment. And that's its sole purpose and its sole job. So again, Rainier, like you shared, being a 3457, trusting your guttural intuitive response. That power is unavailable for others. It's for you to be doing things first, which may or may not down the line benefit other people, right? Whereas the tribe is going to respond to supporting, so it's hands on, right? The collective is going to respond to sharing its energy, whereas the 34 empowers the individual to respond for oneself. The spleen, being an awareness center is a gentle, intuitive clarity, like a whisper cautioning of danger. And the 57 represents a fear of tomorrow. Because the 57 doesn't have a capacity to understand or project into the future or reflect on the past or be able to call upon memories or traditions. Its only capacity is to be able to basically come up with it's not even an answer, it's a response, it's a movement, it's the correct use of the energy or the correct management of the energy in the now moment. And what it is it's like a whisper cautioning of danger, cautioning the individual to danger, what isn't necessarily good for them to be around, right? So a 3457, like yourself, Rainer, you were cautioned by your gentle intuitive clarity not to be around that person who ended up testing positive for Cove, right? Great example. The G center, behavior of the self and interaction with others, is the role and responsibility of the 10th gate. And again, it's a strategy for individual survival. Okay, it's a strategy. How we behave in social interactions isn't necessarily, I don't want to use the word authentic, but it's a strategy. It's like, I'm going to behave like this so that I don't die. It's not that I'm just going to behave like this because I'm innocently behaving like this for no good reason, right? If you're a 10-6 and you're a role model, You better be behaving like a role model, or else, you're going to be shamed as a hypocrite. If you're a 10-3 and you're a martyr, and you're making mistakes, and you're challenging the status quo, right? You better know how to be able to survive the collective or the tribal backlash, right? It's a strategy. And if you have it, you have a fixed way of being able to behave. And sometimes, again, people may have a multitude of the lines. They could have the first line and the fourth line and the sixth line. They could have it conscious, unconscious, in a number of different planets, or just one. Again, you'd have to analyze that on a case-by-case basis. And of course, lastly is the throat, which is a contemplative energy operating in the now moment, transforming energy into right action. It's energy and awareness. So the responsibility of the 20 is to be able to be like the transmission, because remember, the throat center is like a gearbox for the energy. Got the motor through the drive shaft, transmissioning that energy into doing. 3420s are always busy doing things, doing. And the 20 has the ability to actually turn energy into action. Okay, so it's like someone has this core availability that they are then able to express as action or words through what they do with their body, through what they do with their hands. Okay. So a famous chess player, his name's Magnus Carlsen. He has the 20th gate. And I always thought it was a really good example of what the 20th gate is like. So you can imagine a chess grandmaster staring over the chessboard, just totally fixated on that now moment, contemplating their next move. Okay. I don't think he's integration, but he has the 20 hanging out of a defined throat. And in terms of the gates themselves, more specifically the channels, because remember, we're more looking at the channels in the context of how the life force of this energy expresses. There's 4 and 4. And the 3457, which is the channel of power, can be referred to as a design of an archetype. And it's an archetype of what it is to be human, what it is to be an individual, which is to be powerful, to have intuition, to know how to survive intuitively through response, alerting the individual to danger or disease. Because remember, the integration channel is about survival of the individual life form. It's not about being some fancy schmancy, inspirational, creative role model. It's about surviving. Because there's no fancy schmancy, aware, individual, creative role model under pressure to express their unique direction in the world, which is all about knowing. Empowerment knowing. Okay, if you can't survive. The 3420, channel of charisma, and I've got the 3420 bold because the 3420 is one of those very curious channels in the mandala where it's an opposition. You've got the 20th gate, and then across on the other side, you've got the 34th gate. They're oppositions. Okay, so what happens here is if someone's sun is in the 20th gate, their earth will be in the 34th gate, or vice versa. Or if the node, whether it be the south node or the north node, are in either of the gates, what happens here is both become active and the channel definition becomes present. So it's a very prevalent energy in our world. A lot of people, a lot of generators, and remember, generators are like upwards of 70% of the population, right? 60% of the population, obviously this is a manifesting generating energy, okay, are going to have this energy. It's very important. It's critical, crucial. It's crucial that individual people have the power to be able to do things in the now moment in order to survive. part of our design. Makes sense. Okay. And it's a design where awareness must become deed. Okay. Where what you respond to then becomes manifest action, a generative manifesting energy for being busy in the now, again, unavailable to others. Except if you're 3828. And the 3420 is naturally paired with and partnered with 4323s, by the way. So the 4323 is all about being able to explain things in an efficient manner. And this kind of energy is a natural partner to the 3420 to help the 3420 be able to use its energy more efficiently as a guiding force. Kind of like, how do I get this done correctly? Well, you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. Try it out, and then the generator tries it, and then they're satisfied because they're able to have a breakthrough, or third gate of breakthrough, being able to know what to actually do with their energy so that their energy can be expressed efficiently. 5710, so the 57 in the spleen connected to the 10th gate in the G center, channel of perfected form, a design of survival. Here you will see the art of survival, one person at a time, living true to oneself and living a healthy and beautiful life. The job is to find a way as an individual to survive. And once you've basically established the lower pillars of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, okay, so you've made it out of the jungle, you're no longer on the streets, you've moved out of the house, okay, whatever it may be, where you're not necessarily struggling for survival, but you want to be able to survive in style. You want to be able to survive in a way that's beautiful, okay, in a way that's healthy for you as an individual. It's a very creative energy, okay, and it's an energy where, again, the intuition is providing a clear way for the individual to be able to know for themselves how to survive in any given moment. The 1020, so the 10 in the G center up to the throat, hard right to the throat. The 20th gate, it's a channel of awakening, a design of commitment to higher principles, and it represents a pure awakened behavior in the now. And its purest expression is the expression of self-love. So here you have, I behave in the now. I love myself in the now. I know myself in the now. I am now. I'm awake. I'm committed to myself in the now. I'm committed to higher principles in the now, which is a great segue into Ra, because he has the 1020 and the 5710. We have the channel of perfected form, a design of survival, combined with channel of awakening, a design of commitment to higher principles. Right? So what do we have? We have someone who consciously embodied and taught us through his own wisdom, okay, the art of survival. Follow your strategy and inner authority. How do we do that, Ra? Well, you do it one person at a time. And what is that going to lead to? Well, it's going to lead to you living true to yourself and living a healthy and beautiful life. Oh, okay. And what else should we know, Ra? Well, you should know that you're here to be a pure awakened behavior in the now, be a projector, to be a generator, to be a manifester, to be a reflector, be your profile, etc., and to love yourself, right? Oftentimes he would sign off from his lectures or things that he wrote with, love yourself. So here's someone again, although a very self-absorbed manifester personality, eventually did share his wisdom because he was a 20.6 exalted. I find really remarkable. Actually, I wanted to read that line because, so Ra's personality, Venus, so his values, how he related to others, was through the context of his speaking and contemplation in the line of wisdom, and it's exalted. And it says clearly, the establishment for the benefit of society, values, ideals, and their patterns, and how they can be understood and applied. The ability to transform individual awareness for general application and understanding. Right? And wow, didn't we get that from him? We got the wisdom for how to align with your own self love, how to survive as your type, how to survive and love yourself as an individual outside of the collective or the tribal expectations and field of conditioning, and yet not distanced from it, because of course he was a very practical man who understood that, yes, although you may be integration all day long, you still at one point or another are going to have to find common ground with other individuals at the very least, if not within the context of a business, a community, or a member of a society, a member of a collective whole. Yeah, I won't go in so much to Ra's bio because you guys could always check that out. I do find it interesting how in some of his lectures he would speak about how he like lived in a tree on Ibiza and basically lived like in poverty, and when he had his experience with the voice was in like a really old ruina, right? So and he was surviving and living on his own, right? So here's someone, a manifester with an integration energy, giving him the behavioral strategies that he needed to be able to survive on his own, even in some pretty harsh conditions, and be able to survive, even be able to survive his encounter with the voice, which again, he pays a lot of testament to the 5125 in his nature, which is centering, part of a centering circuit, you know. Of course, he didn't have the 34, so he was a manifester, not a manifestor generator. But of course, I'm sure in his life many times he would have encountered 34s, and been conditioned to work and to conditioned to do. Just as an example, when you see it, sort of an incomplete integration channel in someone's design, when they don't have all four gates or all four channels, what that may show up like. And last but not least, good to note which centers are missing from the integration channel. As with all of the other different circuit groups, there's no pressure here, right? It's not a pressure to rush. It's not even necessarily a pressure to think or analyze or be competitive or engage socially, okay? So the pressure to engage socially and make promises, or the pressure to think and figure things out on the mental plane, is not the job of integration. Integration's job is to survive in the now through behaving in a certain way that ensures that that particular individual has a chance of making it into the tomorrow. But it's a moment by moment, step by step process, which you can imagine can be scary, because if you have a lot of integration and you're not attuned to your intuition, and your mind's searching for certainty, it's searching for a plan, it's wrapped up in the conditioned belief that, oh, I need to integrate myself with a tribe in order to survive. But of course, if you're a lot of integration and your energy isn't available for others, that creates complications. Yet again, it's integration is about survival of the individual and that individual feeling empowered as a result of decisions that bring them a greater sense of satisfaction. First and foremost, any kind of support or shared empowerment with others, ideally is as a byproduct of that individual respecting their own inner authority and their own unique nature first. if you kind of get conditioned to do it the other way around, and rather than being sort of more selfish or self-centered in your nature, you may feel a sense of your not self theme, right? Especially if you're a generator, you'll feel probably pretty frustrated with the whole thing. Really about doing what you love to do and doing what brings you a sense of self-empowerment and joy and health and confidence, knowing that you're spending your energy on something that, brings you your signature. As always, I'm open to looking at a few charts of people who may be interested and getting a deeper understanding of how the integration circuitry in your design shows up, particularly how that may relate to your type, etc. So, yeah, before we move into that, are there any questions, comments, feedback, something you guys would like to share?
I have a question. If you have only the hanging gate 34, but it's unconscious, like how do you use that energy?
Is it in a defined center?
No.
So it's just like undefined, or sorry,
Yeah.
hanging dormant. Well,
Yeah.
if it's dormant, so are you talking about yourself?
Yes.
So you're a projector with a 34.
Yeah.
Well, as soon as another individual comes into your life with the 57, the 10, or the 20, it will have a natural link up and become defined. Otherwise, it's dormant. It's kind of like a dormant power within you. And it's kind of an interesting question because, like I said, the 34 isn't even really available for other people. And yet, if it's dormant as a projector, and if it becomes activated by somebody else's integration channel, well, maybe it causes you to sort of feel more self-empowered by that individual being around.
Right.
And yet it may cause kind of a strange dynamic because, again, it's not about support or sharing. It's like kind of like a momentary flash of empowerment while they're there. But then it's like, okay, now I want to leave and do my own thing now.
Right.
Thanks for the hookup.
Okay. Yeah.
But of course, it could also become transformed from being dormant to activated in your sacral if another channel were to be linked up as well. And then so that 34 would then become a font of power that is then blended into the other channels that might be activated by an electromagnetic dominance or a compromise, right? And yet still it would have this pull and this demand to do things independently.
Yeah.
Look at your relationships and see if anybody first and foremost activates it through the integration channel, or if not, what other channel brings it into activation if your sacral is defined around them, and witness how you feel more self-empowered when they're there to be able to engage in the theme of the channel that's bringing the activation. Sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, because guys, when you look at charts and you look at a defined center, and let's say it has one channel in that center with all these hanging gates hanging off of the center, when you're doing like an individual analysis of that energy, what it actually is, unless there's a split involved, which would be a primary emphasis, like a bridge, basically all of those hanging gates become like adjectives or additives to the quality of the channel that's bringing definition to that center. Okay, so let's say, for example, you're someone with a 4323 and you have the gate of details and you have the gate of leadership. Okay, so what that actually would be is someone with a structuring mind, an individual, efficient mind that can also express details for leadership. And yet, everything that that person says in terms of their explanations is going to be colored by and sort of boosted by this emphasis to be detail-oriented in their explanations and to be a leader through the context of their explanations. Just as one example, you'd have to look at a chart-by-chart basis. It helps to make sense of, of it when you look at charts, because charts can be quite diffuse sometimes, where you have a lot of hanging elements. But just look at it and see how those gates are actually brought into the themes of the channel for added context. Okay. Whale? Am I saying your name right? Your nickname? Whale, as in like a blue whale?
Yeah, whale is fine.
Okay. The question, do you want to speak your question, or do you want me to just read it?
Yes. I don't understand when, like, if you have an integration channel like holographic bagel, and then you also have a tribal one. For me, they contradict each other. Like, one is about tribal hierarchies, and the other is about getting out of them and being individual. So if you have both, I don't understand if you sometimes leave one and other times leave the other, or there's a way to like connect them.
Well, first of all, you would have to look and see whether or not they're split off from one another in the design.
Okay.
So if it was a split definition where they had the tribal energy split from their integration energy, it's basically two separate lives. It's a lot to juggle. If it's all integrated through a single definition, well, like I mentioned before, first and foremost, for someone like Bagel, it's to feel self-empowered in what he's doing so that he can then avail himself as a force of support to his tribe.
Okay.
You see? It's like integration always comes first, because the primary emphasis is on the individual feeling satisfied with what they're doing, and then the tribe. It's kind of like the order of operations.
Okay.
In real life, again, maybe he's just very busy caring for his tribe. Busy caring for his tribe, and yeah, you see, and again, you can have collective aspects too. As people with integration channel, and they may have this sort of critical, judgmental talent component to them as well. And the integration, again, would always come first. It's like a very self-absorbed talent, rather than just a talent that gets passed around, and shared collectively with others. Again, you'd have to look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you.
That makes sense? Kind of help?
Yes, a lot. Especially the integration coming first solved a lot of doubts I had. Thank you.
Yeah. And, someone receiving a reading or an analysis of that would be very empowering for them to learn that about themselves, right? It's like, oh, wow, like I had all these tribal demands on my energy, but you're telling me that I should, it's probably best that I experiment with putting myself first. And you're like, yeah, try it out. And they try it out and they feel great and they feel really satisfied. And of course, it's probably going to create some projection and weirdness in the tribe, but waking up as an individual, everything comes second to that. So, okay, great. Thank you for your great question. Rainer, I have a question about connection plus dominance plus compromise channels in integration. I'd be happy to answer like a general question. I can't just speculate on charts unless I actually see them, but if you'd like to share, please feel free to.
Sure, thank you. I actually just edited the comment quickly just for like a specific example. If we want to go there, my question typically is because integration is somewhat unique, right? There's 4 gates that sort of bridge this quote unquote channel. I've seen situations where, I just have one channel, right? The 3457, but suppose the other person has like 57, 10, 20, or the other person has 34, 10, 20. And so what happens is one person will have, I think it would be a compromised channel over the other, but then maybe the other person has like 1 or 2 compromised channels over you. I guess it's kind of a broad question, but how does this all interact with an integration? Just because it's not like the rest of the body graph, there's 4 gates versus the usual 2.
Well, first of all, you still will see compromise. You'll still see dominance, and you'll still see electromagnetic in connection charts. But it's a great point because it's really complex in the way it shows up. I am almost entirely reliant on the software to be able to show me what person is being compromised by who, because it's actually kind of complicated because of the channel being crisscrossed and amalgamated together. I'm trying to look for an example here of some famous people we looked at. Might not have it.
Like if you put me with Raw, for example, like that could be an example potentially.
Yeah. Here, I'll share
The
my.
Raw. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to share my mechanics so you guys can see it. Have you ever met someone in person where you have a compromise with them in integration? Or is this something that you're just realizing now, like, oh, wow,
No,
this could potentially happen?
this was really big actually during my Saturn return because the landlord who I mentioned earlier has the 57, 10, 20, and I felt compromised constantly to the point where I've basically this person was actually pretty involved in my life, and I've really just we're just on generally cordial terms at this point. And so I don't think it's always going to be horrible, but I think maybe if you have compromise plus a lot of not self behavior, it's probably extra hard. And this person was emotionally defined and a manifester as well. And so 3 parts left when I'm 4 parts right. I'm very open. And then during my Saturn return chart in Maya, you might be able to actually see it. And I'd be open to you pulling it up for everyone if everyone's interested. But my Saturn return, I think the entire integration channel was like defined or something. And so I had like 5 or so compromised channels during my Saturn return as well. And so that relationship there with that individual, which was during my Saturn return and my Saturn return transit chart, yeah, I was just extremely compromised essentially. So I'm curious if you want to shed any light on that. I'd be certainly open to it, and I hope it's helpful for everyone else as well as an example.
Yeah. So I'll pair you up with Ra. Just example. So you're a 4-1 generator.
Yeah. Yeah, the chart is correct.
And the 57 unconscious too, eh? So Venus, values and relating. So there you go. Your communication style and the way in which you relate with others is very self-absorbed in its nature. Again, just adding to the flavor of you being self-empowered in the way in which you make decisions and you doing things for your own self-empowered purpose first and foremost, before sharing yourself with the collective or the tribe, which you have a lot of activations, right? So you have all these different ways in which you're bound to connect and in a way represent yourself. But yeah, you're 3457. Interesting. Okay. So in terms of, let's see, so electromagnetic. So here's an example. So you and Ra together, say he was still alive, would form an electromagnetic connection between the sacral and the throat, you bringing the power and he bringing the wisdom. So in a way, you can think of it as you've been conditioned by Ra's wisdom to now know how to use your power and intuition more effectively as an individual. Right? Obviously, as a manifester, it's not necessarily going to be easy to integrate with another individual manifester with integration. It's more like he's informing you, you're responding, you're either resonating with what he's saying or not. But again, together there would be that potential for an empowered transference of knowledge and wisdom from one individual to the next. Exploration is centering, so we won't cover that, but like 3457. So here's an example where you would have compromised Ra. Okay. And again, when you guys are looking at connection charts, at least in Maya mechanics, whatever name comes first here, so Rainer would be compromising Ra in the 3457 because you have the whole channel and he has a single component. And so again, maybe what might happen here is you have a powerful, self-absorbed, self-concerned intuition for survival, and how that power for actually getting things done and how that power and availability is utilized, right, would in many ways rule and overshadow how Ra's personal wisdom and intuition would apply to you. He would essentially, if it was like someone you knew and someone you were close to, their intuition would be compromised by your powerful intuition in the now moment, which could potentially show up as a difficulty in being able to make individual decisions on the same terms, right? So your intuition is saying, stay away from that person in the room who has a disease, and his inner authority is like, oh no, I'll probably be fine. Okay, but you're coming with the power to actually do something or not about it. And again, if he was in his not self, like, oh, okay, well, I better defer my inner authority, which is highly unlikely that Ra would ever defer his inner authority to your sacral availability. But just as an example, you can get complications, you see. So 1020, this would be a dominance in the context of integration, where Ra's behavioral wisdom in the now moment is something that you were witness to. Dominance channels can actually, in a way, and usually are easier to deal with than compromise channels, because it's a way where it's the only place where you're actually going to be able to see someone clearly for who they are. Because the moment you get electromagnetic, the moment you get compromise, the moment you get companionship, right? Actually, companionship is another example where you can see yourself reflected in somebody else. But with dominance, it's like very clear that they are that way. So here was an individual who behaved in his own unique way and expressed his wisdom in his own unique way. And you were an observer to all of that, in the way in which that would have linked up to you in the context of your design is given you like wise behavioral strategies for how to use your power more efficiently, you see. And again, when there's a dominance in a chart, really the only way you guys are ever going to experience this and come to know it for yourself is if you run the charts of people you know and there's a dominance there, study the qualities of the channel, and then watch them, look at them, observe how they behave, observe how they use their energy. Reference back to the keynotes, you'll be fascinated and you'll be like, wow, they're totally operating in a way that I myself have, very little interest or capacity or ability to operate. And it can be okay. It can be fine. It can be somewhere again where they're doing their thing, you're doing your thing, and you're not compromising each other. And it can actually be very complementary to the relationship, to the experience.
Yeah.
So
I'll just say really quickly, my personal dream is like if I can find a 10-20 who doesn't also have the 57.
really,
Potentially.
that's
I mean,
interesting.
maybe there's stuff I don't know here, but I think in this case, what you would have is, and maybe I'm like idealizing or I'm putting electromagnetic on a pedestal, but if one person has two gates of integration and the other person has the other two, then yeah, I'm just curious like what that would look like versus a lot of the integration beings that I have met. There's usually some level of compromise, and I can feel my own channel of power sort of compromising the other, overpowering them. But then in other instances, I've also felt, right, for example, like the 5710 or the 5720, being part of this. The best way to describe it is the other person often has immediate access to behavior, and all I have access to is response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're the power behind the action, but not necessarily the action or how that action is put on display for others to see.
Exactly. So the other person's I don't animals are not the best metaphor, but like it's almost like the other person is like a peacock and I don't know, I'm like a less heavy animal, but all I can do is sort of
Yeah.
run. Yep.
Well, or like, I know this is another kind of, think of like two figure skaters. You're like the one supporting the power and lifting the figure skater above your head, and they're the one with the behavior and the shining example of being in the now moment. And yet it's kind of about, it's
There you go.
an
That's perfect.
intertwined relating where you're both self-empowered and capable of maintaining your strength. Because remember too, like, integration is not actually, it's not about showmanship, actually. It's like survival. It's about being able to move your form through the world in a way in which you align with what's healthy for you and avoid what isn't. It's
Yeah.
interesting again, Ra with his wisdom for how to behave. He wasn't doing this work. He didn't initiate us into our type strategy inner authority just to make us better showpieces or to like doll up our lives, as would be the job of the collective, right, or the tribe, kind of dress us up and make us look better. These are legitimate survival strategies so that we can thrive as individuals on the material plane. Um, yeah.
Yeah, this has been super helpful. Thank you so much. I actually think the figure skating metaphor is really helpful for the
Yeah.
interaction, so I appreciate it.
Yeah. Good. You got the power to do, and the other person has the behavior to be something in the now, and it can be quite a show, you know?
Yeah, it's a great way to think about it because I think I forgot for a second that I had something in that relationship as well, right? And I think when you're compromised, maybe sometimes, maybe especially if you're super open, I don't know, all you can feel is, oh my God, like I don't want the compromise. But I think what I'm getting is more, we actually have, I have the power to lift, and this other person is, they've got something else, and that's interesting.
Yeah. Prana, is there anything you wanted to add to that? Your understanding of that, how that dynamic might show up if you're still there, and comment on it. Something you've seen. So we're talking about, I'll show you, talking about the integration channel, and when you get either electromagnetic or dominance within the context of the integration channel, and what that might show up like. For example, for Rainer, he's got the 3457, so he has this powerful intuition, and yet Ra was dominated with his behavioral strategies and wisdom. Yeah, just kind of what that may show up like for individuals who may be compromised or experiencing dominance within the context of an integration channel.
Ryan, I don't know if you're looking at the chat, but I just wrote in there that I'm all set. So,
Okay.
if this will still help others, great. I would say feel free to use my data, keep going. But, I just want to make sure others also have space for other things that they're curious about. I don't want to.
Thanks.
Yep. Thank you.
All right.
Hey, yeah, I was just
Hey, Prana.
sorry, I was just going to chime in and say, yeah, it's a pretty complex issue. Looking at maybe what planetary placements are in those activations as well, and whether they're part of the incarnation crosses, things like that is also important.
Right. Exactly. Like for Ra, his 57 is part of his incarnation cross. In this example, it's like Rainier was compromising part of his incarnation cross. That would be a big deal, right? Without awareness. That might be challenging.
Sorry, I missed that. Did Rainer know Ra?
No, we just used him as Ra as an example because I had used Ra's design as our integration example today.
Gotcha.
So just had him there. Believe it or not, I actually found it very difficult to find famous people in history that had integration predominantly in their design. There was one guy that I came across who had like survived in the jungle and written a bunch of books about it, and he's like an Israeli man. There's like a movie made after him, but they didn't have accurate birth data. But he had like a component of integration. But it's like, yeah, individuals again surviving on their own aren't necessarily going to be as popular as some collective figurehead in the tribe and being able to find real world examples, because they're off by themselves surviving, not necessarily in the spotlight. Yeah.
Well, the only other thing I would mention here is that if integration, is part of the inner authority, right? If someone's either sacral or splenic, versus someone who might have authority in their emotional center, with integration as part of their definition.
Yeah. Totally. Thanks, guys. Yeah, it is a complex channel, right? It's weird. It's 4 channels, 4 gates, they crisscross, especially when you get compromise, like who's actually compromising who. Well, you gotta just basically rely on the software to be able to look at that. Cool. So let's see. 0 Point, are you still here? Eric, did you want me to?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah,
Just
did
open
you
to
want?
spending a second on it.
Okay.
First, I just want to thank you and express some gratitude for the overview that you've done so far. Just in listening to you talk about all the stuff, it's definitely given me a different perspective on how to look at it, especially in the context of how it relates to myself. So yeah, thank you for that. Definitely can feel the hours of study that you've done. It comes through loud and clear.
You're welcome. Been years and years. And I was saying, because I know you haven't joined us for the previous sessions, unless you were there and I didn't notice, but I'm pretty sure this is the first one you've come to.
This is the first one.
Yeah, when I started studying human design, circuitry, which is this study of the groupings of the channels, was the first time where I really realized how powerful human design is as a teaching tool, and also helped me in such a profound way understand like the human condition, because you have these major themes that are so different, and without the map it's hard to know that they even exist. Like, I didn't really understand what tribal energy was before human design. I didn't really understand what the collective sensing process or the collective understanding process was, or that it was even its own distinct thing. You kind of just think it's all blended together in a mush puddle of what it is to be human. But it's really fascinating when you look at it in the chart and you see how it's very distinctly laid out as separate energies, and they either work together in harmony or they operate in dissonance or just are totally separated from the trip entirely. Like,
Right.
again, as is the case with integration, being so individually focused, and looking at your design, personality sun in the 57th gate, most certainly, right? It's like an easy yes to see that integration essentially as a component of your core essence, right? Your
Right.
radiance. The radiance of your personality is to have a strong intuition.
Mm.
You know, the radiance of your personality has a lot to do with being able to make splenic decisions that help to guarantee success for those invitations that you accept as a projector, as a guide, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, like I mentioned before, it's the kind of intuition that's only available to you. It's something you personally will only ever really know. You know, we can put words to it. You can even talk about it and give examples like
Right.
Rainer did. And yet still it's not shared. It's not something that's available to support others. It's your own personal intuitive capacity for the correct behavior in the now moment. And I know in your question you had mentioned like it's difficult for you, it's been difficult maybe for you to see this energy or to kind of maybe make sense of it. I don't know, how would
Yeah,
you how
I can share a little bit more about that. So my other two channels for anyone that's watching the screen are 4323 and 1156. Um, and I feel like I see those really clearly. I see myself getting invited to do those things, and I can notice when those processes are taking place, but I don't as much notice when like 5710 processes are taking place, despite the 57 being my sun gate. Um, and I think the bit of clarity that I got on it over the last little bit was just recognizing that they occur over different time spans or time frames. Like, I can do a 4323 like sprint on like a business that I'm doing work on for like an hour or two, and then I like redesign the thing and there it is. But the like surviving and living life healthily and beautifully isn't something that like happens in a 1 hour sprint. It's just kind of something that's continuously going on.
absolutely. And yet it's see the outpicturing of that, like you said, it's a long-term process, but it's built upon these tiny moment by moment decisions.
Right.
And also, if you look at your design, the 5710 is split from your 4323 1156. So your analytical, detail-oriented communication styles don't actually have direct access through connection through the circuitry in your design to the 5710. You're what's referred to as a split definition, and more specifically, a simple split definition, where it's either the 33, the 31, or the 20 through conditioning, through interaction with others, that actually bring this energy into an integrated as in connected energetic pathway with your mind and your communication capacities as a projector. So, and also the fact that it's mixed conscious unconscious. This is another big thing, right? So your unconscious behavioral strategies, which by the way are in the North Node for you, and the fact that you were born in the early 90s isn't even relevant to you right now, can make it even more difficult to tune into what is my correct behavioral strategy for survival? Well, it's almost like that's in the future, and it's
Right.
unconscious. So maybe that helps to make sense of why it's potentially been, I don't know, challenging. And yet at the same time, it's active, right? The 57 is active, defined.
Yeah. It's like I was saying, like I can see it when I just look at how my life goes over time. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It's just not like a moment by moment thing where I'm like, oh, I'm doing that right now.
Yeah. And
Although
of course, as a
despite what you said,
projector,
like,
it's more like being.
actually, I'm doing it right now, moment by moment, because that's how it works. But
Yeah.
it just shows itself over time.
But it's an awareness, not a doing.
Right.
Not a doing. Of course, as a projector, we're conditioned. I'm a projector as well. Conditioned to do.
Right.
Do. Overzealous workaholics. It's not a doing. It's an awareness. If anything, it's an awareness for what you should be doing or not.
Right.
And it's like splenic. And again, now you know, and now you can experiment. And it's like the gentle comes once, a whisper. And this theme is self-preservation. And think about it. It's like it's not alone in this journey either. It's connected in a way to the 44, which is kind of alertness. So it's like an alertness for who you should be interacting with as an individual, right? That's going to bring you a sense of your role in the collective. And again, it's later in life where this is really going to become something that I would say becomes even stronger and more prevalent and relevant. You're maturing into an individual who knows how to behave based on what they intuit in the now moment. But
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Sweet. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, folks. I guess if there's no other questions, comments, or interest in integration, we can kind of wrap it up. I guess in summary, it's like integration channel is a very selfish energy, which is not a bad thing. It empowers the individual to be able to survive and make it on their own. You have a lot of integration. It's like it's important for you to feel empowered in what you're doing for yourself first before anything else comes second to that. And I'm sure in many ways it will help you derive a greater sense of your signature.